and that's going to be Chesty Puller,
heavy lifter,
the legend, right? Chesty
Yes.
Puller. And for those of you that don't know any Marines personally or weren't in the Marine Corps, Chesty Puller is about as close as you can get to an idol in the Marine Corps, right? Like he almost at like deity levels. The guy he's like a mythological being at this point. And he's in everything. When you're going to bed in boot camp at night, you're saying goodnight to Chesty wherever he is. When you do push-ups, they're always telling you to do one more. You do everything you do one more for Chesty. Like this, they have picture. We have a picture of Chesty in our studio, and Marines do too. And it's as if Chesty's watching you. So make sure you're doing the right thing. It's in everything. And this guy, you know a lot about him from being in the Marine Corps, but diving deeper into the guy's story and really kind of studying him, I think he's completely deserving of the praise. Just to give you a little bit of background on Chesty Puller before we get into this first offensive action against the Matanikau, he wants to enlist to go fight in World War I. He attends VMI, Virginia Military Institute, for a year, and then withdraws and enlists in the Marine Corps in hopes of making it to World War I to be able to fight. Mm-hmm. He does so well in boot camp that he actually gets chosen to be an instructor, and he goes on. Eventually, they select him for officer candidate school. He goes and he graduates, but he graduates in 1919. The war's over, and just like with any war, the U.S. military downsizes rapidly at the end of a war.
Yes.
So he's out of a job. He's let go, right? Like his discharge, it's over for him. So he decides, well, I'm not done with the Marine Corps. He goes back to being an enlisted man. He instead of being a second lieutenant, which he had just gained, just earned promotion to and then lost, he goes back to being a corporal. And he's going to make a name for himself in the Banana Wars. That's in Haiti and Nicaragua. And he's gonna kind of cut his teeth leading small unit patrols in small unit actions, right? So he is going to be in combat down there, not on the same scale as World War II, but he's engaging and fighting, rebel forces, guerrilla forces, and really earning a name for himself, making a name for himself, and establishing, the tone of how he will approach warfare for the rest of his career, which is extremely aggressively. He will become known as El Tigre by the rebels that he's fighting. I'm assuming that means the tiger. Yeah, that's what I assume. I don't know, but he really distinguishes himself. He even earns 2 Navy Crosses in the Banana Wars in his time in Nicaragua. So he had a few philosophies that really stand out. He truly believed. You hear this a lot from guys that fought in World War II. And I have a theory on that. I'll talk about it in a second. But he believed officers should lead from the front, right? They should be up front. And there are many instances where I'll be able to point out exactly that. He is leading from the front when we get into this story. But he believed, the highest requirement for an officer candidate was to be starkly courageous, right? Going back to like Civil War days when officers were expected to sit on a horse, going across the field in line of battle to in a sense, a Napoleonic style fighting, right? The two armies face up, take turns shooting at each other. Being on a horse in that is just insane. First off, everybody knows who you are on the other side. They all know we just aim for you, right? We're good. And you're a more prominent target. You're higher up. Yeah. That when you get into combat, the thing that you notice the most, and you can notice it when it stands out, and you'll think, I must be fighting someone fairly new, is rounds go high. It's when you're fighting someone that knows what they're doing when the rounds aren't going high, right? Yeah. You can tell you're fighting someone that's done it a little bit, that they keep their rounds on target. I don't know why that is. I vividly remember in Afghanistan being out early on and being on a patrol and getting ambushed, and it was me and one other guy had gotten kind of caught out by the lip of this canal in a single tree by ourselves in the middle of this huge open field. And I just remember we were laying down behind the lip of that canal, and I remember looking up at the tree and just watching branches break out of it, like little branches snapping out of it with the PKM rounds coming through and knocking them out.
And it comes through.
But that's the thing is, I say all that to make the point of sitting on a horse in a battle like that is psychotic. But that's the kind of I guess vision Chesty has for officers. That's what you should be. You starkly courageous, even if it means your own. Do what's expected of you in that sense, and lead from the front.
And you earn the respect of the men that way.
Right. And he loved enlisted guys. He was quoted as saying that out of all his medals, he eventually gets 5 Navy Crosses. That's just a few of the medals he has, which is it's the second highest award you can receive in the Navy or the Marine Corps. It's the equivalent of the Distinguished Service Cross for the Army. So it is no joke, and to have 5 of them is insane.
And it's a ditty at boot camp.
Right, yep. Right. But he said he was quoted as saying that his favorite medal was his Good Conduct Medal, because only enlisted men can get Good Conduct medals, and so most of his fellow officers didn't have one. He's a Mustang, Yep. Now certainly. That's funny to me because really, and if you're enlisted, you don't give a crap about that Good Conduct medal. I mean, you get it. In all fairness, if you don't get in any trouble, you get it at your 3-year mark. Like you really you get it for just following the rules.
It's important.
It is important, but it is funny they give you a medal for that. Yeah. I've always thought that was kind of interesting. He had some unique features about how he operated in the field as well too. He very rarely, unless there was an absolute need, he would never have a headquarters tent set up. He would always sleep out under the stars in the dirt, like his Marines were doing, in a fighting hole, whatever the case is. There are exceptions to that at different times, but they typically required that it be set up that way. He also doesn't have an officer's mess, especially in naval tradition. The Marine Corps, when we were in, Marine Corps is very big on putting its enlisted people first. Enlisted guys go through the chow line first.
Chow line, yeah.
Officers and staff NCOs typically are the ones serving meals and all that. Well, I think that really kind of begins with Chesty and how he approaches things, because he doesn't have an officer's mess. His men eat the same thing that his officers eat, and his officers eat the same thing his men eat. And he would typically have his officers serving chow to their men, serving it out, and then they would be the last ones to eat as well. So I think that I get the feeling that idea kind of starts with Chesty and maybe people like Chesty at the time. Getting back to my thoughts on how Chesty viewed the role of officers and where he gets his aggressiveness from. His grandfather fought for the Confederacy, and he was a Confederate cavalryman in the Army of Northern Virginia, so under Robert E. Lee. His grandfather actually ends up at Kelly's Ford, which is where John Pelham, the famous Confederate artillerist, is killed. And this is just me spitballing here, but there are so many high-level generals in that army during that window of time that his grandfather served in that army that are uber aggressive. I think that legacy of growing up and hearing stories about his grandfather with these guys, we're talking about people like Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee himself, John Pelham, Jeb Stuart. These are uber aggressive dudes, and still known today for being uber aggressive on the battlefield. I think him growing up and hearing those stories and kind of idolizing those guys' actions on a battlefield, how they conducted themselves in combat, and they led from the front, and they took risks, and they were super aggressive. They weren't afraid to fight. I think he took those to heart as a child, and I think as he grew up, I think that just became part of his personality, because he does end up becoming one of the most aggressive commanders, if not. I mean, the only other one that might give him a run for his money is Edson. But I think between the two of them, I think they're probably the most aggressive leaders on Guadalcanal.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip from America Fog of War, catch the rest of the episode here.